You're listening to the Empowered Divorce Podcast, where you practice being the chooser in your life again, one day at a time. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my amazing, beautiful listeners. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Thanks for being here. How are you in this moment? How are you feeling in this moment? Have you checked in with your body lately? Have you done a body scan? Have you just taken a moment to pause, place your hand over your heart, maybe hand over your belly, and feel yourself breathe in and take in all of that air as your chest expands and your belly expands, and then you just release. Taking a moment to say hello to yourself. If you haven't done that today, here is your invitation to do so. Before we jump into the topic today, I also wanted to announce that the Dating from Within workshop, learning how to date yourself, learning how to heal from a life-saving divorce, learning how to come more towards you, loving yourself, that next workshop is June 11th through 13th. I am so excited. What a great way to start your summer. A lot of you might have more time in the summer to date yourself, have some more time getting to know yourself. Let's kick it off June 11th through 13th. Those of you that are on the interest list should have had a notification by now. So with the link to register for that, those of you that weren't aware, you can head over to amiewoolsey.com or the link in the show notes, and you can register for your spot today. I have kept this workshop jam-packed full of information, so much time with me. The end of the workshop, a conversation Q&A live with Scott. All of these sessions are live. You can watch them recorded for a limited time. When you do show up live, you're going to get such a richer experience. You get to ask questions in the middle of this workshop, really make it more of a personal experience for you. It's so much content, which is why I record it. It's everything that I want all of you to know about what it takes to come back to yourself, what healing looks like, what a healthy relationship looks like, what healthy emotional maturity looks like, how you can show up in your life empowered rather than in fear, confident rather than waiting for that shoe to drop in the next relationship. But like I've said, this really isn't about getting you to date. You don't have to be dating or want to date after. Sometimes I think we hold on to a lot of beliefs or thoughts about ourselves, about relationships that are not serving us. And ultimately, every person I've ever met does want to be coupled at some point. They want to have companionship. They want to either be partnered or have a healthy relationship with someone. Even my clients who say, nope, I want to be alone. It's not forever. They might feel that in the moment, but it's not forever. But when you've had so much pain around that, when there's been so much damage and injury around that, yes, I get it. It makes sense. Right now, many of you are like, never again. I totally was in that place. Like you've heard me talk before, I think there's a time that that mentality serves us. It slows things down. It helps us look inside. It helps us to reflect. If we're not doing that work, we're just saying, screw it all, I'm never going to be with somebody, and we stay the same, I think that's when it does become problematic to our own health and well-being. Wherever you are at, the principles and the tools that I teach in this workshop are going to help support you where you're at. I've also had several women who have taken this workshop when they were in the middle of that space of, I'm never going to date again, can't ever see myself. And then they'll retake it a year later, 6 months, a year later, they're in a different place and they will get something completely different out of the workshop. If this is sparking your interest, if you feel the pull towards it, register today, hold that spot. And I am so looking forward to that happening in June. Okay, today we're going somewhere a lot of you have been asking me to go. We're talking about your kids. More specifically, we are talking about one of the most loaded conversations that I think all of us have ever or will ever have, and that's telling your children that your marriage is ending. I want to start by saying something before we go anywhere else that I could probably just end the podcast right here after this sentence. You are not going to get this conversation perfect. That is not what your kids need from you. They don't need you to show up and say all the perfect words. I see so many women freeze in the weeks leading to these kinds of conversations, and they're rehearsing scripts in their heads at 2 a.m., terrified of the questions that maybe they won't know how to answer. They're not sure if they should answer, what they shouldn't say and should say. They're convinced that one wrong word or response is going to break their children or ruin them or even create additional conflict and consequence, especially for those of you that are in high conflict divorces. The reason why I just want to gently push back on that is because the research doesn't back that up. More importantly, your nervous system doesn't need that weight on you right now. So, what actually matters isn't whether or not we do this perfect or I'm air quoting right. What really matters, in my opinion, just based on what I've experienced, but also years of being in this field, what really matters is presence. And it is honesty, honesty that is calibrated toward your child's age and maturity level. It is your body that is regulated enough to stay in the room with their pain, not collapsing, deflecting, or absorbing it. That I would say is the standard that you can meet rather than this, I think, false expectation that we put on ourselves. I see a lot of perfection in that. That's really what I want to talk about today is just how can we meet that standard? First of all, because I know a lot of you have come across them, it's really hard when we also have the world throwing statistics at us, numbers that talk about, 40% of children in the US are going to experience parental divorce by the time they're 18. That's a statistic. And there's a lot of other statistics out there that I know when I went to that parenting class that I was required to do before I could file divorce, I felt like that whole parenting course was just throwing a bunch of statistics at me, telling me how messed up my kids are gonna be, how they're gonna respond with anger, and then they increase of teen pregnant, like all this stuff. And I remember leaving that dumb parenting course that I had to take, which by the way, I never took. And I sat in my car in the parking lot and I just sobbed, like absolutely sobbed. And it absolutely made me go, okay, maybe I can just suck it up and deal with the hell of this relationship for my kids. Totally went there. For me in that moment, I did have an experience where I felt because I was going deep and I was going down a but I was going down a spiral, just really trying to figure out how I could go back and not have my kids be this statistic. I had a moment where I really felt my higher power step in and give me words of comfort and help re anchor me to my faith and what I know about my kids and what I know about myself. What I knew about myself in that moment was that I was and could continue to be my kids steady and stable, that they just needed that from me. And that if I go back, I'm not steady and I'm not stable. And now they have two unsteady and unstable parents. I do know that research is clear that most children whose parents divorce are resilient and don't show any obvious long term psychological problems. The single most documented protective factor across decade after decade of research around this is that a high quality relationship with at least one parent characterized by warmth, consistency, and low conflict is enough. I remember my therapist telling me this and hanging on to that belief. Also, hanging on to a research study specifically on girls and girls raised in a mother headed household after divorce also shows something remarkable that a large majority of these girls raised in that situation emerge as exceptionally resilient individuals because they had the support of a mother doing strong, brave things. They became competent, caring adults. And I can absolutely speak to that with my two daughters that were at those very tender teenage stages of me going through divorce. That one adult is you because you're the one listening to this. There's one more thing that I want to add here before we move on, because I do think that it's critical. Many of you are not leaving a stable, happy home. You're leaving a home that was already unsafe, a home that was filled with betrayal, coercive control, deception, gaslighting, and a kind of chronic stress, chronic co-regulation that lives in your body and your children's body every single day. Those of you that are having this life-saving divorce where you're getting yourself into a different environment where safety and stability and healthy co-regulation can exist is the best thing that you can give to your children. When we walk into that conversation with your kids, you're already doing the most important thing by being the regulated parent, by being the one who showed up. So let's talk about how to actually do this. First, I think there's a few universal principles that I think hold across the ages of time. And I think the most important one is timing and setting. Those two things matter more than the script. Do it during the day, ideally on the weekend when there's a buffer of time afterward before your kids go back to school where they can just be. We don't want to do it before bed, not before a birthday party, right? Or an event that they've been looking forward to, holidays. Give the news some space to breathe. I think timing also matters, and maybe telling them a few weeks before a major change is going to happen, before someone moves out, before the routine shifts. That window of time gives them time to ask questions along the way as they slowly metabolize the news while things are still a little familiar. I think that was one of the hardest things about and I know not everybody can do this. I'm proof of that. That was not available to me at the time. My particular situation did, unfortunately, I had 3 days to get out with my children. And so that absolutely played into some of what they've had to process later on, and has been a really hard trauma for them, is because they didn't have that time to metabolize it. It was very sudden, very quick, very abrupt, and that absolutely impacts their little bodies. We can't avoid some of these things. If I could do it a different way, I would have. That wasn't my situation. If that's something that's available to you, then it is something to consider. But again, not all of you can or will. I think I'm just here to say that, I guess, speak to that part of it, right? Where I wasn't able to do it in this most universal, healthy way. And my kids are alive. They aren't damaged forever. They live very good, incredible lives, actually. It's something that they have had to work through. It is something that they have had to navigate, heal from. I've absolutely apologized for, and even though they understand now as adults the situation, it's still something that that I felt was important to repair. It was a choice that I made that impacted my children. So I think I'm starting with that too, just being really real about my particular situation that didn't happen in the quote right way that all the studies and professionals say it should happen. That didn't apply to me in this particular case because I have been the steady, stable, safe, consistent one in their life. They trust my decision. They trusted that I didn't do it on purpose to harm them. They accepted my apology for not being able to do it a different way. I think that matters. I think the repair around that is also really significant. You've heard me say this so many times. The power is in the repair. So I'm going to go through a bunch of these different things, a list of quote things that technically we could do that could potentially make it a lot easier. But if we're doing any of these things to try and avoid a negative emotion in our children, I think I really want to start there. Let go of that. It is absolutely okay for your children to have a negative emotion, to have a negative response, to have impact. I think if we're trying to do all of these things to prevent that, that in of itself, I think is where we get ourselves in trouble. Why I wanted to just share with you that here, right at, right at the first principle, timing and setting matter, I didn't do that. My kids didn't get that. Not because I didn't want to, it wasn't available. Another principle that can help is for both parents to talk to the children. Ideally, it would be the one who is responsible for the betraying and the harm to own up to that. Not necessarily give details, but to say, I have made choices that have impacted the relationship. And I'm going to own that. And this is a decision that your mom and I have made, but your mom needs space. Your mom needs safety. I can't provide that for her. That would be ideal, right? How many of you are rolling your eyeballs or throwing your hands in the air? Yeah, never got that, never will. I'm right there with you. If that is available to some of you listening, that would be amazing for your children. And if it's not available, you're going to do the best that you can with what you have. And then I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. If we're showing up as regulated as we can be, and I think regulated means we're in our own body with our own emotions, not trying to manage our children's emotions, that's regulated. If we show up honest, right? Doesn't mean we have to share nitty gritty details, but we're not going to perpetuate secrecy. So we're going to show up honest. We're going to show up calibrated to our children's age. The next suggestion to make it as healthy as possible for our kids is kids don't ask the questions that you are prepared for. So a lot of times we're trying to preemptively prepare and plan for all the questions that we think our kids are going to ask. And the amount of times that my clients have said, yeah, I was not prepared for the questions that they actually had. First of all, a lot of our kids know more than we think they know. They are little egocentric, appropriately egocentric children. The questions that they often have are about their life and their world as they experience it. We often are trying to prepare for their questions about our world. But when you're having this conversation with your children, I want to encourage you to think about you're getting into their world. When you talk about this, you're not trying to bring them into your marriage or your world, your experience in your marriage and your world. You're getting into theirs. And I think just that reframe right there can be really beneficial. There's a story that I love about a couple who did everything right. They sat their 4-year-old down, said all of the things, told them how much they loved him, explained that mommy and daddy would be living in different houses. They finished and asked if he had any questions. He was quiet for a moment and he said, well, who's going to look after me? That is childhood. They don't think abstract. They think in dailiness. Who's going to make me breakfast? Where are the stuffed animals going to sleep? Who has the cat? Does the cat stay with mom or does the cat stay with dad? Am I going to get driven to school now instead of the bus? Those practical questions, not just the emotional ones, are oftentimes what my clients aren't prepared for. You getting into their daily world and preparing for those questions more than how do I answer if he asks if dad cheated, right? Because majority, not all, but majority of the time, that's where your children are going to go. Can I see my friends? Will I still be able to go to the dance this weekend, right? Those types of questions. Another thing to consider bringing into this conversation is just very simple, true language, not the whole truth. You don't need to explain everything. For most children, just general statements is more than enough. A lot of times children don't want to hear all the things. They don't want to be involved in grown-up problems. Now, typically, your oldest child, whoever, it's usually the oldest, because I swear they're born with satellite dishes for ears and they just go beep, 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 and they hear everything. Oftentimes, that one child that has the satellite dishes for ears, they are perhaps a lot more aware of what's been happening. They've been hearing conversations behind the doors. They do maybe know a little bit more. You might have that one child that just insists that they need to know all the details. And they're very convincing. They're very good at convincing you that they really desperately need to know. And oftentimes it can feel really tempting because you might be in a place where you want them to know. You want them to know the truth about the other parent. You want them to see the truth. You don't want them to be fooled because you see them being fooled. And so there is a very real valid part of you that thinks, well, this might be useful. I would just say pause, just hit the pause button for a moment before you dive into that. Check with your professional, check with your child's professional, maybe have that conversation with a professional together. I would just say push pause. We don't need to not go there, but let's just wait a minute and get very clear around the truth versus your story, dad's story, their story, and the truth mixed all into that. I think it's worth just hitting the pause button on that because we want to be able to speak truth without and name it without weaponizing it, weaponizing against the other parent, even though it might be very true for you, what you're experiencing with your partner and your soon to be ex or ex, it might not and probably isn't true for them. We don't want to place our experience, our lived experience, and even our attachment wounding with our primary person and place that onto our children and impact that with their primary person. I think there's already some absorption happening with betrayal, especially with the oldest child or the oldest daughter that naturally gets absorbed in that. So we just want to be mindful to not perpetuate it. The other thing to watch for, look for, maybe shoot for is a non-negotiable message. And that is, this isn't your fault. There is research on children in divorce that is constantly pointing to that cognitive dissonance as one of the biggest risk factors, meaning kids fill in the blanks with things that they don't know with self-blame. They think they caused it. They think that if they'd been better, quieter, easier, then this wouldn't have happened. So being very direct and non-negotiable in this, very clear, say it more than once, as many times as you feel called to. You did not cause this. This is grown-up decision, and it had nothing to do with anything that you did or did not do. That is a non-negotiable statement. The other thing to consider bringing into these conversations is just naming the constants, not the changes. A lot of times we want them to know this is changing, this is changing. They want to know, is this changing? Is this changing? Not that we can't address that. And I would say, nevertheless, what we want to hold a little bit higher, have more emphasis on and around is what is staying the same. Your children's nervous systems are already scanning for what's disappearing. We're going to counteract that by being very specific about what stays. Who picks them up for school, where they sleep, that you will still make their lunch, read them the bedtime story, show up at their games, your love for them, dad's love for them. Even if you don't think dad's love for them is right now, do not get into the weeds of that, okay? A child needs, it is attachment science. They need to believe that both parents love them. So even if you are seeing absolutely the opposite being shown and displayed by that partner, do not give your child that meaning. If they come up with that themselves, that's one thing, but you do not want to get in the middle of that attachment. Let that play out in the way that it naturally will. Because I know that this twisted my brain up a lot when I was going through the middle of this, I want to just be very clear and give you a couple things to think about. When I'm talking about this, there's a whole other element that I want to make clear. We don't just allow other people, including parents, to harm our children. So when is it healthy and necessary to step in? When there's physical, emotional, sexual abuse happening, when there's exposure to domestic violence, when substance abuse and misuse is impairing that other parent's ability to caregive for your children, when there is severe emotional instability, manipulation, psychological harm, neglect, environments, if you're already separated, divorced, and the environment in of itself is unsafe, reportedly unsafe, those are healthy, necessary places to step in. And then I would just say stepping in with professionals, still by your side supporting you, but also perhaps needing to pull in professionals in the legal system to step in. Because the secure parent's job is to protect the child's nervous system from harm. That is part of being a secure attachment. What I'm referring to generally, when it's generally not healthy to step in, is those parenting style differences. When there's emotional immaturity from the other parent, poor judgment, but not dangerous behavior. There is a difference. If you don't know the difference, contact a lawyer. They will tell you the difference. What I'm giving you is what my lawyer had to give me. When you disapprove of the other parent's value system or their lifestyle, how they're living, even if you think they're living fake, right? They say they're living their values, but clearly they're not, and you have all the information as to why they're clearly not. Those are the kind of things that are not helpful to involve our children in, especially in these conversations. Because when we do, it creates that conflict within the child. It might, well, if I love dad, then I'm hurting mom. If we're going to disrupt that attachment bond, we just need to be very wise and clear about what we're doing. So if you're in this conflict and what I'm saying, you're just kind of like, I don't know. And I kind of feel like this is what I need to do. Just seek out professional support and slow that down, get more curious, because you're probably not wrong. It would just be wise on how you approach interfering with that attachment bond. Because again, it's not the bond itself that's a problem. It's when we're doing it without clear necessity, because it can create its own form of distress or trauma. So we're trying not to compound things if at all possible. Does that mean restraint and a lot of self-control? Hell yes. And man, have I been there. Does that mean you're going to painfully watch some of this unravel in front of your eyes? Yep, that's what that means. But it is better for you to allow that to play out the way that it naturally needs to than you getting in and messing with that. Trust me on this one. Now, when your child is asking a question and you don't know something, you don't have an answer, it is absolutely honest and okay to say, I don't know right now. What a beautiful, what a beautiful thing to say. That is a great question. And I see that the answer to that matters. And so it matters to me to give you an answer, and I don't have one yet, but I will, and that's my job, and I will let you know as soon as I do. That kind of honesty builds trust more than I think you all realize. That is going to build trust more than a forced answer or a made up answer or an answer that you're giving to try and make them feel better. Their nervous system will pick up on that. But to give an honest answer with an I don't know, but I know that that matters to you, so it matters to me, and I will tell you as soon as I know, that is a beautiful way to respond to some of these questions that you might not be prepared for. The other thing is this is not a one-time conversation. Sometimes we go into this thinking, okay, we're going to have the talk, kind of like the sex talk, right? Okay, we're going to have, that's how it happened for me. Just the one book, and then we're never going to talk about it again, right? The same thing applies here. We're not going to have this be a one and done conversation. Your children process in waves. Their nervous system adapts and adjusts in waves. And so all the questions, weeks, months, and I always say years, because that's my experience later, in the middle of dinner, when you least expect it, will come. So building a culture right out of the gate with this first conversation that you can always ask, and I will always tell you the truth. Again, I will always be honest, is a great way to start the conversation. One of the things that I always said to my children over and over is, you can ask me anything and I will not lie to you, but the timing is yours. Really having that ongoing access to you is its own form of regulation for them. Now, this is the part of the conversation that I think a lot of my clients get anxious and nervous and apprehensive about. When there's been infidelity in the relationship and we do want to protect our kids, we know that they don't need to know all of the nitty-gritty details. We want to protect them. We don't know how to answer. We know that they still are going to want a relationship with their father. And despite how aggravating that can be for some of you, I know, they do still need a relationship with their father. It's hard to balance all of this. And I think just want to validate the complexity and all the emotions and all the fears and all the questions that you might be afraid that they will ask. Yet there might be a part of you that even wants them to ask. And that makes sense too. Like I mentioned before, ideally, and not when most of you are not going to have this, but ideally to have both of you be able to, both parents be able to have this conversation, and the parent that created the injury to take ownership of that without needing to give all these details, but to take ownership that I created injury and I am sorry. This is the result. We love you. We're going to be here for, and all the things that I mentioned earlier. If that's not the case, maybe you are still showing up together, but your partner is adamant that you keep this a secret, that you keep the infidelity a secret. I'm going to say something very, very clear. Secrets are more harmful than age appropriate truth. Secrets can be so harmful for children, not because they need to know the details, but because they feel the tension, they feel the confusion, they feel the inconsistency without having the language or truth to make sense of it. Children are incredibly perceptive, way more than we give them credit for or think they are. And when something significant is happening in the family system and it's hidden, they will often internalize all of that unease in the environment and begin to create their own explanation, which can lead to anxiety, self-blame, anger, just that sense that something is wrong, but we're not supposed to talk about it. Keeping secrets in this context can also really disrupt a child's sense of safety and trust, where healthy development, when we're talking about children, healthy attachment, healthy child development at different ages, it does rely on emotional honesty and that congruence. When the emotional reality in that home does not match what is spoken or acknowledged, children can learn to doubt their own perceptions. Like, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wrong, right? Then they feel pressure to even stay quiet and protect that family secret. And then over time, it impacts their ability to trust themselves. It's like when I ignorantly was gaslighting my children, thinking I was protecting them. It's not, again, didn't need to give on full details, but I absolutely could have said, yes, your body is absolutely right. You're picking up on something. Mom is not feeling that great. Mom is tired. Mom is angry. Mom is frustrated. Mom is sad. But at its core, the harm is less about the infidelity itself and more about the silence, the secrecy, and the lack of emotional clarity surrounding it. So we want to provide honesty, reassurance, and emotional safety in these conversations to help children make sense of their world. Remember, this is about their little worlds. No matter how they're going to maintain connection to the primary caregivers in their world, that matters the most. When we're talking about this, whether you're doing this on your own because the other parent isn't on board with the values and standards of this conversation, I guess I'll just validate that for a minute. Sometimes I'll be walking clients through this, and they'll try and have this conversation with their ex or soon to be ex, like, okay, we need to talk to the kids. When's a good time for you? Can you? And it just gets put off and put off. Or the other parent is not on board with being honest. Again, don't have to give details, but they don't want to mention it at all. So now we're in this position. Well, what if the kids full on ask? I'm not going to lie. And then that just creates a fight between you two. If we can't be on the same page, if we're going to come to the children together dysregulated or arguing, then it is better for the child to hear it from you alone, where you can be regulated. You can show up in that value system and with integrity. If that other parent isn't going to be aligned, then it does make sense that, you know what, it's going to be better for the kids to get at least my regulated version. And yes, does that mean that the other parent can give their dysregulated version? Yeah, absolutely. That's my story, right? That absolutely happened. But I really had to let go of his dysregulated and false version, stand by mine, being open, honest, and regulated, having this conversation, letting it be open, right? It's an open conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. This isn't a one and done. There were times that I felt like, that mama tuition just kicks in. And there were times that I would just feel like I needed to bring it up again and say, hey, it's been a while, but I just want to remind you that if you have any questions regarding the divorce, If there's something that's impacting you or you're struggling with, I am here to answer any questions, support you however you can, even if that means you need to go talk to your therapist. That's how I would just bring it up when I felt like they were struggling with something. Let them know consistently that I'm going to be there. They heard me all those years, but wasn't ready. I didn't need them to be ready before they were because it wasn't for me. It was right. This conversation wasn't for me. And that's just such an important piece to remember here that even when the questions are around infidelity, if they are, we want to make sure the goal here is factual, not emotional. So your dad made some choices or mom made some choices that broke agreements in our marriage. There hasn't been responsibility for those choices yet. That's part of why we aren't able to stay together and has nothing to do with you. You are loved by both of us. Some things are private for grown-ups, but I will always be honest with you when you ask me questions. That is truthful. It doesn't trash the ex. It doesn't ask your children to hold your pain, and it protects you from being cast as the villain, which that is a lot of the concern and fear from a lot of my clients. Now, does this mean that the other parent won't cast you as the villain? No, unfortunately. And again, been there, had that. As long as I didn't get wrapped up into the other parent's story about me and I stayed anchored to my story, that kept me regulated and steady, safe, consistent. That's what matters. But man, is it challenging when I felt like I was the bad guy. Because the scenario that I see over and over is if the mom is the one who ended the marriage, and when I say ended the marriage, that means the one that decided to have that life-saving divorce because of the behaviors of the other parent, the unrepaired, destructive behaviors of the other parent. If the divorce filing is from the mom in this situation, then it is oftentimes the mom that gets the bad guy label, the villain label. My particular story is I was absolutely made to be the bad guy. You're the one that filed, or you're the one that wanted this. I didn't want this. Okay, hold on a second. If you didn't want this, then you should have done ABC or XYZ, right? Those are really, really frustrating situations and really challenging because getting into the weeds of all that never pans out. There is that high road that has to be taken. And there's a time that in my experience, a lot of my clients are the villain. They are the bad guy. They have the narrative of the other parent used against them. Getting into the weeds of this with your kids is never helpful. It doesn't mean that you can't state truth. I'm not saying that, but we definitely don't want to take the bait of the other parent. So with that, mom kicked dad out, mom gave up, mom isn't forgiving enough. That dynamic is not just painful, it's a form of erasure. Like your reality, your pain, your reasons, your safety, all of that gets flattened into mom wouldn't work it out. When that's anything but the truth because you just about killed yourself trying to save this thing. I just want to validate how freaking awful that feels. That research is really direct here. Ideally, the partner who broke the commitment, the partner who broke the vows and boundaries, violations of that relationship should absolutely be the one to acknowledge that to those children. It's a betrayal to them too. Age appropriately, of course, that ownership of I made the choices that hurt our family. I take responsibility for that. This protects children from that distorted narrative. It models accountability. It keeps the loyal parent from being painted as the one who destroyed the family. Many of you are not in that situation. You don't have that parent that is willing to take that accountability. Because in all honesty, if they were, they probably would have taken accountability a long time ago, and maybe there would be repair. I really feel for those of you who have the latter of that experience. And you tell your truth simply and factually without venom. You don't over explain. You don't recruit your children as your witnesses, which is so hard to do. I understand. And it ultimately can bite you in the butt when we do that. You've got to be your own witness. And you do not erase yourself from your story because your story matters. There's a phrase that I love saying to my kids. I will always tell you the truth when you ask something. That phrase that I would say to my kids and have said and still say, I will always tell you the truth when you ask me something. That positions you as the safe parent. And those words can be trusted. When the other parent is also saying, I'm going to tell you the truth, and you know that it isn't the truth, then it makes you want to counter that truth. Then we get into this back and forth, and he said, she said, that's not going to help you. When that was happening in my situation, had a lot of feelings, had a lot of a lot of eggs chucked at trees. But ultimately, I chose to believe that my children were intelligent enough and could trust themselves to know the difference. And this is one of those things, y'all, that time often takes care of. And when there is inconsistency in the other person's life or language or lifestyle or story, it plays out. The relationship with that other parent and child oftentimes needs time to play out. I think I've mentioned this before. My therapist that I had, this was very early on in the separation divorce period. And I was worried about this very thing. And I was telling him, what if they choose him? What if they believe him? What if they leave me? What if they think I'm the bad guy, the villain? Like I was just bawling around all of this, right? And oh my gosh, I wanted to smack him because he said, yeah, that might happen. And it might take 30 years for your children to understand the truth and to see the patterns of the other person, but you've got to stay consistent. It's true. Be that safe parent, and it will play out over time. When he said 30 years, I literally wanted to punch him. And he was right. He was absolutely right. And I hated hearing that with everything in me, but I also held on to that with everything in me as a roadmap. Like, okay, I want this all to be just laid out on the table now. That's going to put me in this back and forth. It's going to put the kids in the middle. I had to come back to me, come back to my truth, and get out of trying to manage what's happening on the other side of the street. That was not easy. Me saying it doesn't imply that it is going to be easy for any of you. And I think just knowing what to practice and knowing what might set you up for a future healthy relationship is what we're trying to accomplish here. It might be really muddy right now and really terrible, stressful, and the fear of the children abandoning you or viewing you a certain way might be very real for you right now. I'm not going to sit here and say that you should feel anything other than what you're feeling about that. I think that's really, really valid. It's hard sometimes to take a step back and see that our children are going to grow up. They're going to develop. They're going to be adults. They're going to be wise. Believe that your children are smart. Believe that they are capable. Believe that they will trust themselves. When you believe that about them, it will impact how you show up around them. The other thing that I just want to mention, I did briefly, but the ages and the stages, just giving a little bit of maybe a guide, use your mama tuition around this to mold it to the way that feels right for you. The conversation that we have at what age, I think is just something to consider for you and your children. I think under 5, the routine is the message. Very, very young children don't understand divorce conceptually. What they do understand is my world still safe? Am I still going to be taken care of? Is mommy still here? That language is just very, very short and concrete. Mommy and daddy are going to live in different houses. You will have a room in both places. You will always be taken care of. You will have your food. We will arrange your stuffies to be at, each house. Maybe we buy 2 different stuffies now, whatever that looks like. It's very much get into their little world. What they need most at this age is your physical presence and your calm, regulated body as much as you can right now. We're not shooting for perfect here. That's not a thing. Hugs matter, I think, more than words at this age. Maybe that physical holding and touching where they feel you present in their life. Don't be alarmed by regression, bedwetting, clinginess, tantrums. That's their nervous system talking. It's just important to listen and be consistent while their nervous system still settles. Typically, and this is just statistically what I have found and read, 6 to 12, I think this is the hardest window. Research does consistently identify this as the most difficult age range for a child to process divorce because these kids are old enough to remember things that were different from before the divorce. They're also self-aware enough to wonder if they caused it. I think this is an important age range to really reiterate over and over, this is not your fault. And if they ask directly, did I do something to make you fight? No, never. This is grown-up decision, has nothing to do with what you did. If when infidelity is involved, a child at this age can handle, dad made a choice that hurt our marriage. It's a grown-up situation. You don't need to know all the details right now. It's not a secret that these things are hard. They are just hard. And then answer those questions that they actually ask. Don't volunteer more than what they're reaching for. One of my go-to suggestions is if they ask a question, ask at least one or two questions before answering, because oftentimes what they're asking is layered. There's really often a core need underneath that question. So when a child asks, well, why? Why are you and dad getting divorced? Rather than trying to come up with that answer and, okay, where do I even freaking start? Right. And that's what I see a lot of my clients do. Where do I even start? What do I say? And how do I say it? Try responding with a couple questions as a follow-up, just to get a little bit more clarity. Maybe that's just first validating. That's a really important question. It's a good question. Can you tell me what made you start wondering about that? Or what have you noticed lately that made you ask? Or what feels most confusing or worrying to you right now about that? Then maybe the child says, well, are we going to move? Oh, okay. That's what they want to know. See, if I would have started off with, well, okay, so in 1998, like, where do I freaking start? But no, again, get in their this is about them, their little egos. Get in their world. Okay, are we gonna move? Great question. Are you thinking about your home, your school, or something else? Tell me what you're imagining might happen right now. That's another question. Well, maybe then it's, well, is this my fault? Oh, there we go. I'm really glad that you told me that. What made you wonder that it's your fault, that something happened that made you feel like you're responsible? Those are good questions to ask. See what comes underneath that. Maybe you get the question, well, do you still love dad? Dad, do you still love mom? That sounds like a really big question. What are you hoping to understand with that? Or what are you worried about what that means for our family? What your children are making up, how they're processing, what meaning they're giving all of this right now is more often not what you would expect. Making that just a habit in general, that when your child asks you a big, hard question, ask a question or two as a follow-up to see if there's something layered. What is underneath? More often or not, there's a deeper worry or fear or need. And that is what we can meet. That right there. Now, for teens, truth, respect, and agency. These three things matter. Teenagers are almost always closer to the truth than we think they are. They are not ignorant. They have heard things. They have felt the tension probably for years. And so coming to them with this sanitized half story often backfires. And it can feel really condescending and can often erode their trust in you if we're approaching it in that way. So for teens, More honest is almost always better. They can handle your dad had an affair. I'm not going to share all of the details because some things are private between adults, but that's why our marriage ended. And I will answer any questions that you bring me honestly. Teens also need agency. They need to feel like they have some input in this process, not the burden of deciding. Okay, so hear me right, but the dignity of being consulted. Research does show that when young people feel their perspectives are considered, they are more likely to feel that the divorce parenting plan or the arrangements or the agreements are unfair. When they feel like the different arrangements reasonably are fair, they adjust better emotionally. One study showed that children's participation in post divorce decisions found that the amount of say that children believed they had was directly linked to their sense of fairness and satisfaction with the outcome. Really, what I picked up on with some of the research that I was flipping through was because this can be really tricky, right? It's not like, hey, let me know what you want in the parenting schedule. That's not what any of these studies are saying, but considering, right? Letting their voice be heard, even if it doesn't work out the way that they want. That's a life lesson. You're not always going to get everything you want, but you get to be heard. I'm going to hear you and I'm going to hear why it's not fair. Here's what we're going to do. You can totally have feelings around that, but I'm going to absolutely make sure that you know I heard you and I understand where you're coming from. Sometimes there's things that you won't understand yet that I do now. And so here's why we're going to do it this way. And you don't have to feel like it's fair, but I want you to know that I heard you. I will hear you out. That is respect. And teens deserve that kind of respect. They are working on becoming these mini adults, right? And already pushing for more agency and more control and more power in their life. That's a natural developmental behavior for them. We don't want to lump them into the 6 through 12 category. We want to continue to help them develop their adulting and those more mature, emotionally developmental process. And that means you get to be heard and have a voice, and we're going to have a respectful, right, conversation. And we always don't get what we want out of those conversations. Oftentimes, different states will also recognize, and I think that's why the research is there because courts use a lot of this research to say at this age, 14, 15, a child does get to have a voice in court because they understand that this does matter to that particular age group. If you can lean into that, if you're fighting that, if that feels really hard right now, this might be something to work through with a professional. I get it. Giving up control right now where it feels like you're giving up and losing so much isn't fun. It's not fair for you either. I think one of the hardest things is when you have, 16, 17-year-old that wants to spend the holiday at the other parent's house. And technically, even though they're still a minor under the parenting plan, they are in that age where, but what are they choosing? What do they want to choose? And if, am I really going to get in this battle? I want to validate the nuance of these types of situations. I'm not right. I'm not ignorant to to the magnitude of complexity that arises when we are dealing with teens and when they don't want to go to the other parent's house and when cops are involved and like this can get really really tricky when the other parent drags the other parent into court and makes the child testify. I've had so many challenging and sad, hard, difficult cases, situations that I've come across in the years of doing this. I say all of this with that just in the back of my mind. Like, that's why some of these episodes that I do are really hard because I know that there are some of you listening that are like, yeah, but my situation is this. Yeah, but I get that. Take what works. Maybe you even feel like there's this part of you that's like, I know I need to give up some control with my teen. I know that I'm really, really, really trying hard to hold on because I'm afraid that if I let go, they are going to stay over the other parent's house longer. They are going to want to, not abide by the parenting plan. I know I can't force them. I know that's going to be a pain in the ass to force them. I know I don't want to take them to, there's a party that probably knows that. and is afraid, if we are showing up in fear and holding on to our child in fear, I believe that is going to impact you in the way that you're not wanting. There is a very, very difficult, hard, painful choice that sometimes we have to make. It's not fair. I'm not going to say anything to try and convince you that it's fair. It's not, because, again, the majority of you listening didn't choose this to begin with. The fact that you might be faced with a teen that isn't choosing you, that is believing the other parent in their lies. You are faced with another devastating loss. I am not going to sit here and tell you anything to try and make you feel better about that. I would not feel better about that. What I do know in those situations is a lot of what my therapist years ago told me that might happen. And you stay consistent, you stay steady, you stay in your control bubble, and it might take some time for them to come around. That is not what any of us want to hear. It just isn't. There is a whole other conversation about grief. I know that there are support groups specifically for women that have estranged children due to this kind of divorce, especially when they're teens and you want so badly to just say, I've been here painfully. There's that part, and I'll speak for myself. There were many times that I thought, you know what? If I just tell them the truth, if I just sat them down and told them the details, then they'll see, they'll get it. It's tempting. It is tempting as hell to want to just say, you know what? Fine. You think let me tell you the truth. Like, oh, you think you know oh, let me tell you the truth. Like, I'm not going to lie. That absolutely was tempting. And I'd be lying if early on in this process, I didn't cross a line or two. So I can tell you from experience that it didn't help anything. And it did create harm. And I had to do some repair around that. Again, man, am I thankful for a good therapist for me and my kids to help pull me back. So I know a little bit of both sides. It is not a fun situation for those of you that can relate to this. Showing up honest, consistent, reliable, steady over time. It's the tortoise wins the race kind of a game plan. When it doesn't work out the way that we hope or want, it is so valid and appropriate to allow the grief to validate that. This leads me to, I think, another really important piece here, and what was so helpful for not only my kids, but we really did this with my stepchildren, and that is giving them more control when everything feels out of control. This one for me is really close to my heart as a somatic practitioner, especially because it is fundamentally a nervous system conversation. When a child's world reorganizes around them without their control or consent, when homes split, when routines shift, when relationships change, their body goes into that threat response naturally. Ours did, theirs is going to. And one of the primary responses to threat is the need to control the environment. It's what probably a lot of you can relate to. I absolutely tried to control my environment, always rearranged my house in different ways that I try to control that. This can show up, though, as rigidity. It can show up as power struggles, meltdowns over small things, obsessive, compulsive focus over logistics around things. All of that is protective. And their system is really just trying to find, where is my solid ground here? Where can I land? The research backed answer to this is not eliminating that need. It's to channel it into something healthy. So we're not telling them you can't control. We're saying, here's what you can control. Again, age appropriate choices, choice within a structure, agency within safety. So for little ones, which stuffed animal comes to both houses? What color do you want your new room to be? What do you want for dinner tonight? My little guy, my stepchild, he was on a mac and cheese kick and he wanted mac and cheese breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was one thing that we just said, fine, control, right? Not going to fight. You're not going to die. I'm hoping it wears off in a couple weeks. I think it lasted a month, but mac and cheese, here we go. That was one thing that for whatever reason gave him comfort, which, come on, it's mac and cheese. Of course, he was very picky about what kind of mac and cheese. Comfort food. Who doesn't eat comfort food? He did. So yes, absolutely not going to fight that one. That was a safe thing to allow that little one to control what they wear, how they want to do their hair, what music they listen to. Again, what color do they want their bedspread to be in the new house? Those are really great things that they can control, creating their own control bubble and writing what is in that bubble, what isn't. And mom and dad are outside of their control bubble. Siblings, not in their control bubble. The divorce, not in their control bubble. Really helping them get a visual to what is and what isn't. School age kids, what activities do you want to keep? How do you want to decorate your space at mom's house, dad's house? What should our Friday night tradition be? What, do you want to choose the movie tonight? Do you want to pick the music on the way to school today? Those kinds of things can be really healthy control things that give them more to help give them that sense of agency within safety. I actually had a client that had a fantastic idea. And so I'm going to share. I really, really loved it. She said that with her teen trying to give them more control, she says, you know what? I think I'm going to, you haven't done this yet. I think I'm going to have them open their own checking account and we're going to start giving him allowance and have him budget his money. He gets to spend his allotted money. He'll put some in savings and then he can spend that money however he wants to give him that sense of control. I was like, that is a brilliant idea. I love that idea. It's safe, it's structured, it's teaching. It's a great teen thing to do anyways, learn how to manage money and balance that money before he gets an official job. But how he spends that allotted money, totally in his control, giving him that sense of healthy control. Fantastic idea. Be creative. Get your kids buy-in. What would help you feel like you have more control? What are some things that you feel like you want to have more control around? Bringing them in, your teens, into that discussion. And I would even say, school age, maybe a little bit too. What does that look like for you? And let's talk it out. Let me hear you. Your voice matters. Those small choices feel very real, and where their nervous system can just, again, slowly learn that even when big things change, they're out of our control. How can I find safety? You're teaching healthy nervous system regulation here with this. That's why I love it. And it is my favorite thing. Here's what I hope to leave you with today, because I know so many different things that might be coming up for you. And there's no way that me or anybody else is going to have all the answers for you. I 100% believe that you have the answers. If you need to work with someone to help you find some of those answers and unpack some of the layers that might be getting in the way, like fear, threat, your own wounding, do it. Get that support. The conversation that you are dreading is also an act of love. The fact that you're listening to this episode, preparing and thinking about how to talk to your children. And even if you've already had like the initial, like your kids know you're getting divorced, maybe this is your episode to revisit that, because it's not a one and done conversation, right? Maybe this is your invitation to ask them that question again. How are you? And is there anything that you want to ask? I just want you to know I will tell you the truth. And if you're not ready right now, I can honor that. I'll ask again. I will keep showing up. I will be here for you. You don't need the perfect script. You need a regulated body, a willingness to share age appropriate truth, and the courage to stay in the room and stay present when it gets hard, when their emotions are hard. Your kids don't need a flawless parent. And I used to think that. I tried so hard to just show up perfect. That's not what regulated is. It's real. It can even be acknowledging what you're feeling. That's regulated because of self-awareness. They don't need a flawless, perfect parent. They need you. They need you present, honest, and there. If this episode resonated with you, I would love for you to share it with another woman in your circle who is navigating this. If you want to go deeper, if you're in the thick of this and need that personalized support, feel free to reach out. These kinds of conversations can throw you into a hopeless, helpless, fearful state. My hope is that this conversation today gave you something, even just one thing to hold on to that put you back into that position of chooser. Even though you're not necessarily choosing this divorce, despite whether you filed or not, you didn't choose for your partner to make these choices. There's a lot in this that you didn't choose. And we step back into chooser in some way. What does that way look like for you today with that agency that you acquire by becoming the chooser in this one small way just today? What will you create? And how do you want to create that conversation for your children? Even if it's the second or third conversation, what does that look like for you? And know that you can handle that conversation as the chooser and creator in your life because you can. Take care, everybody.